Hi, this is the last episode for 1998, next we'll start off the 1999, for which I have pretty high hopes for. But before we get there, let's see what we're ending up with here. All the signs in the sky, and those that I can read from the crystal ball and my discarded tea bags, seem to point to the future being rather dark, gloomy and dystopian, and an early rather than late future at that. Vigilance depicts just that, disappointingly devoid of anything good, not so distant future. Crime, violence and terrorism seem to be plaguing each and every of our waking days, and the world appears to be beyond saving. Enter Scion, as in Special Intelligence Operations Network, a group consisting of 8 operatives, chosen based on their special skills, exceptional abilities, high intelligence and adaptability. Wow, that sounded like a pitch for 1980s action TV show. They are cream of the crop and chosen to counter all the terrors brewing in their nests, before they can get bigger and eventually grow out of control. Vigilance is a third and first-person action shooter in which you play as the Scion, picking an operative to control before every mission. There's 3 women and 5 men, and each of them has their own specialities and weak and strong sides. So, picking the right agent for the challenge ahead is very helpful. Most missions can be completed with any of them, so you will not lock yourself out of progression, but the right choice definitely makes a difference. If any of the characters fails during the mission, and I'd like to note here that I said that they would fail and not you controlling them, because you're you and you never would, then the next agent has to be chosen to carry the mission to its end. All of them are rather talkative, muttering unique tones and phrases constantly, and while these are fun for the first half an hour or so, their vocabulary is so limited that they're more likely than not to start getting on your nerves after. All the missions naturally have objectives that need to be completed, and they're often a series of smaller tasks that need to be done in a particular order, like finding a specific item or items, explosives perhaps, then getting to the location they need to be set in, and then leaving promptly, blowing the place up as you run away. That kind of stuff. While they're not very demanding and usually something you'd do anyway given the opportunity, it serves as a decent motivation for all the shooting that you'll do. The environments are rather interesting, beautifully rendered in 3D, with characters, yours and enemies serving a respectable polygon count in their models, at least for the time. That said, most of these surfaces will soon be covered in bullet holes as you go through them, annihilating anything and everything that comes your way. The best thing about Vigilance though is its action-packed gameplay that's supported by over 40 different weapons that you can find and regional damage system, meaning a single shot in the head is always way more effective than emptying half magazine worth of bullets in the enemy's heel. Vigilance is good fun, and while it's not all-time classic like Tomb Raider or Quake, it's definitely good enough to stand on its own legs. Uprising to lead and destroy, staying true to its title, allows you to do just that, so lead and destroy. And all that in its action-packed, real-time strategy and shooter mixture. Don't let it fool you though, despite looking more like a shooter, it doesn't skimp on the strategy. It depicts a conflict between humans that colonize the galaxy, living in peace and harmony no less, exactly like we know for a fact now observing geopolitical situation all around us, humans never would. And the generic Twitch alien race that appeared seemingly from nowhere and wants to conquer all the worlds capable of sustaining life. While you spend most of your gameplay time in a tank, you're not at this conflict alone, and you have to lead it actually. So you'll be setting up bases, calling buildings to be erected in them and manufacture all manner of units. Soldiers, tanks, aircraft and even nukes. You know, because we just love the nukes. If not to use them, then to parade them as some kind of a military demeasuring contest. You're also responsible for leading the units to victory. Bases can be built on few very specific points on the map only, known as the Citadel paths. They have to be claimed first and have enough space for the Citadel, which for all intents and purposes is just a main base building and few other additional buildings that you'll be able to call in for to be placed around it. These buildings are all used for manufacturing of units, hence strengthening your army and supporting your military efforts. Uprising 2 is an RTS, but one without any unnecessary resource gathering mechanics, laser focusing on explosive combat only. Now, as you go about annihilating alien scum, spreading freedom one laser beam shot at a time and capturing citadel paths, your enemy is not sleeping and doing the same. So the battle is rather action-centric, constantly throwing dangers at you from all sides. Aliens send their own attack forces at your bases, just the way you do yours at them. Interestingly enough, you don't direct units into the battle same way you would in traditional RTSs like Red Alert or Warcraft, but have to teleport them to the locations where you'd like them to do their deadly deeds. The catch is that you don't point on the location on a map, but have to actually get there in your tank first. and mark the teleport point by hand, so to speak. So, whether you want a breather or not, to win, you're always going to have to be in the heat of the battle. Uprising 2 is pretty fun if you enjoy both RTS and shooters, and an interesting take on a bit stale by 1998 genre. Delta Force is loosely based on the United States' Delta Force Special Operations military unit, and it's a tactical first-person shooter. And as such, it was banking on realism through and through, rather than going for more popular and widespread arcade shooting. It was the right call, it seems, as it was both critical and financial success, and it helped immensely in popularizing of the tactical FPS genre. Delta Force is composed out of 40 unique missions spread between 5 campaigns set in different theaters of war in Peru, Indonesia, Uzbekistan and Novaya Zemlya. While all the campaigns are available from when you start the game and can be played in any order, not all missions are, and you'll need to complete the earlier to gain access to the latter. The typical mission would see you starting in one of few random startup points, then complete all the objectives that you are given, and finally either end the mission then and there, or have to move to the extraction point. Objectives can be quite varied, and based on missions real Delta Force is known for tackling. So, elimination of all hostile presence in a particular region, assassination of high-profile targets, destruction of military equipment and rescuing/escorting of civilians or POWs to the extraction points. These are some of the based on real-life challenges that you'll be partaking in. Naturally, all weapons found in the game are based in reality too, and you can either use the default included loadouts or modify them to your heart's content, picking and choosing between all the available weapons before each mission. It's worth pointing out that unlike grand majority of shooters of the time, bullets are not calculated under the hood, so to speak, but the real in-game objects traveling from point A to point B when shot, having their trajectory simulated realistically, accounting for drop, speed and time to reach the target, which may require leading your aim at the target that's far enough. It's seemingly a small thing, but makes for a much more engaging experience, and I'm sure most hardcore fans of the tactical shooters can swear by it. The enemy AI is great too, on higher difficulty that is, as on lower they look for you as if they left home without glasses and shoot as if they were holding the guns sideways, like they're sometimes held in cheap action movies. When set appropriately high, the AI is not only much better at locating you based on your movement and shots, but also more accurate and can even use more advanced tactics of covering fire or splitting into smaller groups and encircling you. I'm not great at tactical shooters, correction, I'm not great at shooters overall, and tactical ones especially, but I do enjoy getting lost in them from time to time, imagining that I'm really there on an important mission, ramboing the enemies one by one, trying to get to the captives in need of rescue, or to explode a fuel depot behind the enemy lines to slow their offensive. If you enjoy those types of experiences too, and are not easily put off by late 90s graphics, Delta Force is definitely worth a look. Asghan the Dragon Slayer is an excellent title for the anime series straight from Japan, full of dragons that breathe fire, dames waiting to be saved, and questionable, tentacle-filled acts of interspecies loving. But it's also a Tomb Raider-like action-adventure fantasy-themed game with some very superficial role-playing elements. Your father has been killed, and I'm sorry. By dragons no less. While it's nothing out of ordinary in the medieval fantasy times and people have been eaten by all manner of dragons, wyverns, griffins or even spider pigs, your father is your father, or rather was one, and you playing as the titular Asghan swore to avenge his death. And since you've no idea which of the numerous dragons has done it, cause you're a little racist too, and all of them look the same to you, you head off to the mythical land of dragons to kill them all. As brave as it's stupid, I must add, cause all you have starting off this John Wick-like quest is a sword, and dragons have all the dragony things you could imagine. So deadly claws, razor-sharp giant teeth, they breathe fire and have like at least 2-3 tons of weight advantage on you to boot too. But as the saying goes, if you're not gonna tell someone that what they're about to attempt is impossible, they will go ahead and make it possible. I'm not sure how it went exactly, but the sentiment stands. As you go on this seemingly impossible quest, you'll lay death and destruction to all the creatures that will stand in your way, using many different weapons that you'll find, and spells and exorcism too. Cause why the hell not? I mean, all good games require a dark prayer. You'll also dabble in some environmental puzzling, not unlike the one found in Tomb Raider. You'll clear series of dungeons and arenas too, leaving a trail of dead bodies behind. And these will be all different, as there's over 60 kinds of enemies. All unique in how they look and fight, but completely identical to one another in how they lie there on the floor lifeless after you've done with them. Asghan is an interesting take on the action-adventure, serves heaps of pretty good combat, some Daredevil worth even if unnecessary jumping sections, a little puzzling here and there, and quite a lot of fun, if you don't look for anything deeper than the aforementioned Tomb Raider. It should be noted though that Tomb Raider is obviously a much better game, there's no comparison really. Bane is a helicopter-based action shooter. Despite being the arcade title at heart, however, it features some rather realistic elements to it too, like accurate modeling of weapons and their effects, and simulation of inertia and wind impacting your craft's movement. As in most similar games, it's the near future, and terrorists are expanding their activities considerably, threatening the world peace. So you, once again as the only hero capable of stopping them, are asked to pick up the mantle of the savior and deal with them once and for all. You take a role of an air cavalry commander and along with up to 2 wingmen have to take on the baddies in over 80 different missions set in different locations. Some will take place in the cities, others on chains of islands, desert or even over dense forests, to name a few. You'll be sent anywhere a hero is needed and you'll do whatever hero needs doing, even if it's taking a break for a Coke and pizza. Do not question the hero. There's few copters you'll have access to, famous Apache and Comanche among them, and you'll tackle the enemy day and night, good or bad weather, until there's none of them left. Or till you get tired of it all and jump to another game. I'm not saying that Bane is bad, quite the opposite in fact, I'm only implying that you just may want to take a breather after a long day of laying death and destruction at some point. Bane is kinda like Jet Strike, but newer and offering higher fidelity graphics and sounds. Is it better though? Hard to say, neither of them is the best arcade game out there, not even close, but both are equally as decent and fun for a few missions every now and then. In the future, as the title stipulates that the game set in, Caps should first and ask questions later, provided that there's anybody left capable of answering them, that is. So, playing as a Cap in 2098's Los Angeles, you investigate various crimes by asking the questions everywhere, all around, to anyone, one bullet or missile at the time, and coming up with no answers, but mayhem and destruction instead. Odd. Anyway, you're sitting in your X1 Alpha, a police robot capable of transforming into either fast and nimble hovering pursuit vehicle or slower but heavy armed mech. On the fly, no less. And you can experience future COP L.A.P.D in one of the two modes, Crime War or Precinct Assault. First is your typical story mode, following your day-to-day bullet-spewing responsibilities, taking many different missions, from dealing with the rogue lunatics fortifying themselves in civilian buildings, all the way to taking care of a malfunctioning supercomputer and everything in between. And as you progress through this mode, you'll unlock new parts of the city and partake in new kinds of missions. Interestingly enough, this mode can be played in co-op too, and in a unique way at that, in which both players must survive for the mission to be successful. Then there's the Precinct Assault mode, which for all intents and purposes is a very early iteration of the MOBA genre, you know, like Dota or League of Legends. So MOBA-style gameplay, but without the MO, and only BA. It's played on enclosed arenas with bases of both opponents on far opposing ends and the objective of invading of enemies' HQ, all the while capturing outposts and automated turrets in between the bases and deploying defensive helicopters and flying fortresses superplanes to secure the captured areas. There's 5 of these MOBA-like maps, and while they're naturally much simpler than what we're used to today, they're an interesting experience nonetheless. Future COP L.A.P.D is a fun third-person top-down shooter, so if you like those, you'll no doubt appreciate the variety this one offers with its unique gameplay modes. Xenocracy is an action space combat simulation with some political strategy elements. Yep, you heard that right, political. Don't let it scare you though, as Xenocracy can be run in the arcade mode, which entirely omits the strategic layer and only keeps the arcade simulation missions. Anyway, in the far-off future, and this time I really mean it, it's not 2098 like in one of our earlier games today, it's 10,600 AD, or more accurately, 10,600 of the Common Era, whatever that may mean. And mankind has long been colonizing and settled in space. So far in our solar system mainly, but we're evenly spread between the Earth, Mars, Venus and Mercury. And all of the factions governing these planets are in direct, but not yet escalated into an all-out war with all the others, conflict. So, effectively, we're in the state of interplanetary Cold War. Which kinda fits, cause you know, vacuum of space is commonly considered to be cold. It's not the case, as since there's no particles in it, there's no temperature either, at least not measurable ones, so I think I'm off topic again, following one of my random trails of thought. I should get back on the track. What's worse is that the conflict is on the verge of breaking into a full-fledged, real war. One that would not only consume billions of lives, but also possibly threaten the existence of humanity. If there's conflict, there's a reason. Sometimes it's superficial, sometimes it's territorial, sometimes it's racial or based on prejudice. This time, it's the most common one in fiction. War for resources, namely reserves of so-called leukocyte that's found in the outer colonies. All that kinda reminds me of The Expanse, the sci-fi series, and Beltalowda, I mean Belters being used by the bigger factions and not considered to be worthy equal rights. If you've not seen it, it's rather good and very realistic in terms of space travel and combat. Anyway, given the severity and seriousness of the situation, only the United Planet Nations, a peacekeeping organization not aligned with either of the powers, can stop skirmishes and raids between them and try to prevent the war. You play as a commander of one of the elite units of UPN. The game's divided into two chunks. First is the strategic layer with the solar system map, on which you get to observe the hotspots and conflicts emerging, and then decide where to send help to. Helping one of the powers naturally upsets the other, so it's best to divide your attention equally, not to turn from a peacekeeper into the igniting force between them. Each of the decisions that you'll make here comes with consequences, which then you clearly presented and learn the outcome of your choices. The second quote-unquote part of Xenocracy is a simulation shooter in which you participate in various skirmishes in space and over the planet. There are mainly either protection or destruction of mine complexes and/or convoys, but they're rather fun. There's also research, and it plays increasingly more important role in your campaign the further you get and the bigger challenges that you'll face. There is no reason to dance around the subject anymore. All the parts of Xenocracy are decent, but not great. Put together, however, they form something new and unique, which, while not groundbreaking perhaps, it's fun and worth experiencing. A mega powerful and dangerous nuclear device has been stolen by the TERRORISTS, and they threaten to use it against the planet of Esoteria and its colonies. I know that misspelling certain words has to be hella annoying, and I apologize for that, but the YouTube's algorithm is rather unforgiving and it tends to bury the videos with them spoken aloud. It's stupid on so many levels. I know that, but it is what it is, and I hope it's not too big of an issue for you. Anyway, as I said, the weapon has been stolen, the planet is on the brink of destruction, and there's only one person in the galaxy who can save it. And it's you, Techno-Assassin of the future. Questionable name, but whatever, you are one and you will save us all. Esoteria Techno-Assassin of the Future is the third-person perspective sci-fi action shooter. It's not an all-out guns-blazing one though, and it requires you to think smart and utilize both stealth and sniping when and where possible, preferably everywhere and all the time. The story unfolds steadily and gets progressively more detailed as you go through the game, eventually touching on many subjects other than war. Stuff like moral issues of creating a biomechanical assassin, using him for killing only, and his humanitarian rights, or lack thereof. It's deeper than it had any right to be, and if not for anything else, then for that alone, Esoteria is worth experiencing. The character that you're playing as, Raven, is made out of glass and paper clips, and any real full frontal conflict with nearly always seriously outnumbering him enemies ends with him either dead or heavily injured. So, that aforementioned sniping and stealthy approach is a must. The levels are rather nicely looking, full 3D and appropriately so futuristic, but the sheer size of some of the stages may be more confusing than anything else, and you may find yourself wandering around them from time to time, straight up looking for where to go next. The enemies on Raven all look rather bad. There's no reason for a game from 1998 to use flat sprites instead of 3D objects for the characters, and they stick out like a sore thumb, or a single curly fry in a bag of french fries. Difference is, you actually look forward to that fry when you find it. And sprites in a 3D world by 1998 were doing nothing more than breaking the illusion and taking you out of the experience. Still, however you wanna look at it, Esoteria is not a bad game. It's just better at its storytelling than gameplay. And that's something no dev ever really wants to hear. Grand Prix Legends is a 1967 Formula 1 Grand Prix season simulation by Papyrus. Yes, the Papyrus that I seem to be talking about all the time recently. The once masters of realistic simulations, today sadly non-existent anymore. Why make a game about 1967 in 1998, you may wonder? Well, the devs wanted to look back at the racing when it was the most action-packed and risky. In 1967, the trucks still had trees, houses and other roadside objects around their very narrow roads, which when passed by added a lot to the sensation of speed. What's more, they gave it their best, trying to simulate the cars from the era as close to real life as it was possible. And let me tell you, these cars were not the near self-driving beasts that we have today. They were notoriously difficult to operate at high speed and on sharp corners. What's more, the physics engine got a major overhaul, apparently to be the new benchmark for realism in racers. Turns out it had its ups and downs. Same could be said about the opposing driver's AI. It was excellent, but paired with no slider for the difficulty meant that you always drove against the best of the best that there were, which unless you've trained for weeks on end meant that you had a rather bad and frustrating time. Grand Prix Legends, while being an excellent title for simulation enthusiasts, failed commercially. And it's because, while it was universally praised by those who were into the classic F1, that subset of gamers was rather small. What's more, the game was developed in a way that made playing it considerably easier with a steering wheel, pedals and a stick, which is great, you know, I get that, but most players had keyboards and mice only. And racing on this was a little nightmare for those who had no wheel controller. This alone cut the already small group of potential players into even smaller pieces, trimming all these who couldn't enjoy it because playing competitively on a keyboard was very challenging. Steep learning curve, high entry point and unforgiving difficulty made Grand Prix Legends a disappointment. It had everything it needed to succeed, same as previous Papyrus's games did, and sadly failed to drive it home. Bad pun intended. I know of at least one of my viewers who was eagerly awaiting for me to talk about this game. Die by the Sword is a third-person perspective fantasy-themed action-adventure like no other, and I mean it. It was years ahead of its time and probably the most immersive combat game that you'd seen to date. What do I mean by that? Well, imagine the combat system that was in Daggerfall, but 10 times more advanced and actually working. Yeah, I know, incredible. It's not a mess, but a fully working and usable manual sword fighting mechanic, with different combinations of moves for slashes, stabs, jabs, parrying, all done via mouse and keyboard, utilizing many different mouse moves and numerous keys for controls. Sure, sounds terrible, but it only sounds like it's overly complicated, because while you may not get it in a minute, 10, 15, half an hour tops, and you'll be running around slicing the enemies and performing near instantaneous parries to their attacks too. The system is complex, but it's not broken, unfriendly or unfair. All it asks you to do is give it little time to learn it and form muscle memory to all the attacks and guards. I oversimplified the attacks by using their names a minute ago, making them feel like they were particular pre-baked ones, but it's important that you realize that you actually have a full control of your swinging arm and can move it in any way you'd like. And what's even better about it is that the damage is not static number, but it's calculated using elaborate underlying system, keeping kind and direction of the attack that you make in mind, along with the size of the swing, so force that the weapon would have upon impact. It's something that was not replicated anywhere until the modern times games. We seem to get those now like every other day. Same goes for blocking. There's no button for it like in other games, and all you have to do is direct your weapon in a way that would put it in a position to intercept the enemy's weapon's attack. Naturally, shields operate similarly, though you can't control them as freely as if only one mouse. It has to be said that if for whatever the reason, all I just said makes you feel uneasy or seem off-putting, after all you wanna do is kill somebody, spill some blood, and not study for a degree in physics and thermodynamics, then there's the arcade control mode too, that literally simplifies it all to just a few buttons on a keyboard. But opting for that would be a mistake, because the freedom that the built-in combat system offers is not only unparalleled, but also allows for very precise attacks. And you know what that means, right? You don't? Well, let me explain, because it's pretty simple. It means that when you master it, you'll be chopping off limbs and decapitating bodies left and right, and will de facto become the Riddick of medieval fantasy times. A killing machine like no other. Story-wise, your beloved Maya, beautiful name I must add, was kidnapped by the kobolds. Now, this can't fly. Not on your watch, and not when it comes to your love. She's good, she's kind, unusually for the times that the game's set in, clean, and a passionate lover. So, you can't lose her. Having no other choice then, you pick up your sword and head off to cut her out straight from the belly of the beast, figuratively speaking. Other than the enemies, there are also environmental hazards in the game, but it's the combat that is the most prominent feature and one worth experiencing. So much so that the built-in multiplayer offering arena and tournament was a lot of fun too, with up to 4 of you going at it all at once. Even if you're not into the whole medieval slashing and hacking or don't care for action games at all, Die by the Sword is still worth checking out, just to sample the mechanics that it's built upon, because there was nothing like it in 1998 and for many years after either. Oh, and the graphics, sounds and music especially were rather good too. I forgot to mention that getting lost in everything else, so yeah, that. I think we've ended up 1998 on a high note, We didn't dip too much into the bad or the unknown, so I'll have some games left for the obscure series that will probably come in the future. And for now, I will start gearing up for 1999. What do you think of today's games though? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. Smash them if you have to, it helps more than you could ever know. Also, I would like to thank you and all my amazing Patreon and YouTube members for helping this channel keep going. And last but definitely not least, I would like to thank all the wonderful folks who record and upload playthroughs, let's plays and other retro-centric videos here on YouTube, because they help to preserve the games that would have otherwise been long forgotten. So thank you.